We think of imposter syndrome as this thing that makes us less confident. But imposter syndrome is just like a heavy weight at the gym. Every time we pick it up, we get stronger. While negative feelings can feel uncomfortable in the moment, they are one of the most powerful ways that we build lasting confidence. Because when we show ourselves that we can weather through that difficult emotion and we can keep showing up and we can stay in the game and keep giving it our all, that is when we truly start to feel badass and unstoppable.
Welcome to the Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jess. I'm the host and creator of the Art of Speaking Up podcast, and I'm a coach for women. I support women who work in the corporate and 9-to-5 space. And if that is you, and if you want to feel super confident inside, you want to show up big at work, and you want to carve out a really impressive, exciting, fulfilling path towards leadership in your corporate career, you are in the right place. And today's episode is especially important if you are super ambitious and you want to grow and elevate into leadership roles, because today I am talking about something that is one of the biggest obstacles that I see preventing my clients and the women who I get to interact with day to day, preventing them from showing up big and making the biggest impact possible in their role and just in their careers, and that is imposter syndrome. And I honestly love talking about imposter syndrome because I think that the process of tackling imposter syndrome turns you into a badass. I think of all of the different types of mindset work you can do. For me, in my experience, working through imposter syndrome is just one of the things that when I'm at the other end of that process, I feel so solid and capable inside. And I feel so good about myself and so unstoppable and so badass. And that's one of the reasons I love talking about it so much. In today's episode, I'm going to share with you an unconventional perspective to help you navigate through imposter syndrome. Because what I see people often do is they try to cure, quote unquote, cure imposter syndrome by eliminating it and by never ever feeling incompetent or never questioning themselves. And I really like to turn that model upside down. And I like to navigate and work through imposter syndrome by embracing it, by embracing imperfection, by embracing being messy, by embracing that you don't always have all the answers, and that's okay. And what I have seen is that the more you can just embrace those things and make peace with those things, the less those imposter syndrome feelings haunt you so much. So that's what this episode is about. And I want to start with just a simple example to kick us off. And the example is this. If a client came to me and said to me, like, Jess, my goal is to stop feeling incompetent in my role. I want to feel like I know what I'm doing. I want to feel really solid. I don't want to be questioning myself. I just want to feel that like unwavering level of certainty every single day in my professional life. That is my goal. So if a client came to me and told me that that was their goal, my advice to them would be as follows. I would say to them, if it is your priority to never feel like you're stretching yourself and never question yourself and never question your competence, my advice would be to find an area of expertise, to get really, really good at that area of expertise, and to stay in that area of expertise for the rest of your career. In other words, don't try to grow into something bigger. Don't try to evolve into something new, something different, something larger scale. Just find something and just keep doing it over and over and over. And you will eventually stop questioning yourself and your competence because you will have gained such a deep level of mastery of that specific thing. However, your career will be devoid of growth and evolution. So if you want to move upwards and you want to get promoted, that probably won't be a path that works for you. You probably can't stay in the same exact spot forever and ever. And I share this example with you because I believe that imposter syndrome is a natural and healthy side effect of growth. I think that if we want to never experience imposter syndrome, then we're better off just staying in the same role, staying in the same place over and over. If we want to grow and try new things and stretch into bigger roles, imposter syndrome is unavoidable. And here's why. For me to explain why, I want to teach you the difference between two different models that as humans, we can use to acquire skills. The first model is called the learn-perform model, and the second model is called the perform-learn model. So there's learn-perform and perform-learn. I'm going to explain to you what each of them is, and this is going to show us why imposter syndrome is not just unavoidable, but why it's normal and why it's actually okay. And then I'll talk about how to navigate it so that it doesn't get in the way of you showing up big and making a big impact in your career. Okay, so the learn-perform model is the model that we are all trained on when we are in school. In school, we first go through a period of learning. We learn. We acquire all of the knowledge and information, and then we perform. So usually what that looks like is we take a test and we get a grade. But before we take the test, we learn everything. We study everything. We gather all the knowledge. So it's like we fill ourselves up with the knowledge, and then we show up on test day and we perform. And that is how we demonstrate our competence. We go through that period of learning, and then we perform to show that we have learned. That's the learn-perform model, and it's where learning comes before performing. Now, there's another way that we can acquire skills and competence, and it's called the perform-learn model. And these are my terms. These are phrases that I have coined. Now, I'm sure you can guess how the perform-learn model is different than the learn-perform model. In the learn-perform model, first we learn and then we perform. We take the test. But in the perform-learn model, first we perform and then we learn. So in a school setting, that would be equivalent to like taking the test first, getting an F on the test, and then going in and looking at why you got so many answers wrong and learning by correcting your answers. Now, obviously, that's not how school works because school is the other model. It's learn, perform. However, for so many skill sets and areas of competence outside of the very traditional academic paths, the model for acquiring competence is perform, learn. In other words, rather than gathering all the knowledge and learning everything and knowing everything and then just showing up and acing the test, instead of doing it that way, you show up and you try to do the thing and maybe you do it wrong. But through that process of doing it, through that process of performing, you then learn. So you don't start by theoretically learning. You start by just showing up, performing, doing the thing. And through that action, you learn. Some examples of skills that are more frequently acquired through a perform-learn model include skills like sports. With sports, let's say you want to learn how to play tennis. You can't sit down and read a book and then go pick up a tennis racket and play an incredible game. You have to pick up a tennis racket. And of course, there will be some learning. You will get some instruction, but you have to perform. You have to swing and hit the ball and just get out there and play before you actually know how to swing. But it is through that performing that you learn, and there is no other way to do it. Now, perfectionists, and if you listen to my show, you are probably some form of perfectionist or recovering perfectionist. I certainly identify as being that. But us perfectionists, we tend to prefer the learn-perform model. We don't want to get out on the tennis court and swing the ball and look like an idiot because we don't know what we're doing. We want to study for the test and memorize every single possible answer and then get an A because we did all the learning. So for those of us who are a bit more type A, a bit more perfectionist, We really like the learn perform model because it helps us feel more in control. And for many of us, the opposite model, the perform learn model, where we just have to go out and do it, can make us feel incredibly uncomfortable. Now, something that I want to point out about the perform learn model is that it requires a phase of incompetence. It requires you to perform while being incompetent at performing before you actually acquire competence. There is no way around that. And many of the skills that you acquire in your professional life are acquired using the perform learn model. I want you to think about everything that you know how to do in your job, like list out everything that you know how to do. And for each one, you can go through that list and ask yourself, do I know how to do this because I learned it in a book and then I just showed up at work knowing how to do it? So AKA, did I learn how to do this using the learn perform model? Or did I learn how to do this through the opposite model, the perform learn model? In other words, did I learn how to do this skill because I had to show up and just watch other people do it and start doing it, and now I know how to do it in my job? I guarantee you, unless you work in a field that's very, very technical, there is a really, really good chance that you acquired most of your professional skills that you have right now through the perform learn model. And that does tend to be how we grow in our careers. We don't learn how to do that next new thing by someone handing us a book on it and us reading that book. Although I know so many of you wish that that would be the case, and I totally get it. That would be so amazing if we could just get a book on whatever it is we needed to learn, and then all of a sudden everything was just great. But typically, that's not how it works in the professional world. Typically, we're operating on a perform learn model, especially as we are moving up into leadership. So when you take on that next big promotion, that next big leadership role, no one's going to hand you a book and be like, here are the instructions for what to do in this role. You're just going to be put in the role and you're going to perform. And through that performing, you're going to learn your next set of leadership skills and your next level skills in that role. So I want to now tie all of this back to imposter syndrome and start to talk about why imposter syndrome is normal and natural. And you can probably start to see why as you think about the perform learn model. If you are learning a new skill by just doing it before you're competent in it, of course, you would sometimes feel incompetent because incompetence is part of the process. Now, when you experience that incompetence, there are a couple different ways that you can make sense of it. The first way that you can make sense of it, which I would argue is closer to the truth, is you could say, oh, well, I'm in a perform learn model. I have to do something before I know how to do it. So of course I don't feel competent because I'm not competent yet. So what I'm feeling is normal. That's one reaction you can have to the experience of imposter syndrome. But the reaction that most people have is, oh, I feel incompetent. I must be the only one who feels incompetent. There must be something wrong with me. I must be missing skill sets. I must have skipped something along the way. I must not be in a role that really reflects my capabilities. They must have put me in this role by accident. That's another way that you could make sense of the experience of feeling incompetent. You could internalize it as meaning that something is wrong with you and that you're the only one experiencing this feeling of incompetence. It is unique to you as opposed to being a universal, normal, typical, expected part of learning skills in a day-to-day professional environment. So what I want to offer to you is that the feeling of incompetence is normal and expected. And that if you never feel incompetent, it's probably because you're not growing. It's probably because you're doing the same thing over and over. And so rather than trying to avoid imposter syndrome and rather than trying to avoid the experience of not feeling competent, what I think is a really empowering way to approach it is just to say, I'm going to become a really good imposter. So instead of me feeling like it's so bad that I'm an imposter and it's so bad that I don't have this skill and it's so bad that I'm learning this for the first time and it's so bad that I don't have all the answers, instead of thinking all of those things, I'm just going to think, okay, I don't have all the answers. I don't yet have this skill. I've never done this before. I don't exactly know what I'm doing, but I'm going to be the best, the freaking best at showing up when I have no idea what I'm doing. And I love that because it takes away the pressure. It takes away the pretense. It's no longer about being the person who has it all together and has all the answers. It's just about being the person who's willing to be messy and determined and gritty and who's like, okay, I'm going to get really good at figuring things out, at learning things, and at being in this experience of incompetence. If you are resonating with this episode, you are going to love my free training, CEO Vibes. It's a 5-part audio training where I teach you 3 leadership skills that'll help you feel unstoppable in the face of imposter syndrome so you can excel in your role and as a leader. This free training lives inside my free resource library. Join the free resource library by clicking the link in the show notes or going to jessguzik.coaching.com/free resources and you'll see it right at the top. Okay, back to the episode. Now, one thing that I want to offer is that the most powerful thing that you can do for yourself when it comes to getting quote unquote good at being an imposter and navigating those periods of incompetence that are inevitable in a professional environment where you are growing is to learn to create a sense of emotional safety and security within yourself when the feelings of incompetence arise. Because typically, even at an intellectual level, if you know like intellectually that it's normal to feel incompetent, it's normal to be doubting yourself, because you're in this perform-learn model where you sometimes just you aren't competent and you're learning as you go, even if you intellectually know that that is a normal thing, often our emotional experience is 1 or 2 steps behind what we intellectually know to be true. So theoretically, you could have an understanding of it's normal for me not to know everything. It's normal for me to have questions about what people are talking about in this meeting. It's normal for me to not completely understand the project that my boss has asked me to do. Even if intellectually you know that's true and you listen to this podcast, you still might have feelings of anxiety or not belonging. And where I see people going down the wrong path is they have those feelings and they think, okay, the solution to these feelings is I need to stop being so incompetent. I need to stop not knowing what I'm doing. I need to become good at everything. And then this is where you get into patterns of like over preparing, thinking that you need more training, more education, more degrees, right? Because you have this feeling of anxiety and incompetence. And you think that if you become more competent, it's going to solve those feelings. But remember, you're in a perform-learn model. You can't learn your way out of a perform-learn model. A perform-learn model is inherently going to make you feel incompetent. So rather than trying to force fit a perform-learn model into a learn-perform model, which is what I see a lot of people doing, they're trying to learn their way through their struggles, when in reality, we're no longer in school. The learn-perform model doesn't work anymore. You can't read a book and learn your way out of some of these intimidating, difficult situations that you encounter. So instead of doing that, what you actually want to focus on is being able to navigate the emotions that come up when you are in a work environment that requires you to do things before you feel 100% competent. Now, one of the best ways for me to help you understand this is to share some personal examples. So I came up with a list of examples in my own life where I was in a perform-learn model and where that model brought up feelings. And I specifically just want to hone in and focus on the feelings because that's what matters most in all of this. So let me share the examples and then we'll talk through how to navigate the feelings that come up. So a few examples of when I was in a perform-learn model. Number 1, every single time I started either a new job or a new project. So I had 3 big times in my career where I started a new job. I worked at McKinsey, I worked at Pandora Media, and I worked at the Walt Disney Company. And pretty much like clockwork, with every single one of those jobs, when I first got there, I didn't have competence. Even at my Disney role, when I was later in my career and I already had years of experience, I didn't have competence in that specific company and the mechanics of that organization. It doesn't matter how much strategy experience I had and how much knowledge I came in with and how confident I was in myself as a strategist. I did not know how Disney worked, right? I did not know the particular nuances of that organization. I had to spend time being incompetent while I gathered the competence. And during all 3 of those experiences, I experienced feelings of anxiety, worry, overwhelm, embarrassment, questioning myself, feeling small. Other times where I've also felt those difficult feelings was when learning a new skill. So some skills that I've learned and experimented with over the past few years. I learned tennis over the past several years. When I had to get on the tennis court and swing and miss the ball in front of other people, I felt silly. I felt stupid. I felt embarrassed. When I took improv classes and I had to get up and do an improv scene and I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't know how to be funny and the scenes were not very good, I felt ashamed. I felt dumb. I felt embarrassed. And I felt embarrassed even though I knew intellectually this is an intro level improv class. This is improv 101. No one in this class has experience. Everyone's doing it quote unquote bad. And intellectually, I could literally see that everyone in my class was at the same skill level. We were all doing scenes that weren't that good in the beginning because we're learning. So at a very intellectual level, I know that no one in this class has the skill yet. No one in this class is great at this yet. And it's normal and expected to not be good at this. And yet still, when I went up to do my scene, my mind wanted it to be perfect. It wanted me to be under the learn, perform model, where I learn everything and I'm great at it, and then I perform it perfectly. And when I didn't, my mind and body offered me feelings of disappointment, frustration, embarrassment, shame. And what I want to offer you is that if you want to become unstoppable and you want imposter syndrome to stop getting in the way of your career, then what you want to focus on doing is becoming stronger and more resilient than all of those bad, difficult feelings that come up. Because when I took those improv classes, even though I had moments where I felt embarrassed and I felt ashamed and I felt like I was messing up and doing it wrong and everyone thought I was dumb, even though I had those experiences, I kept taking more and more improv classes. I kept doing live improv performances, not just in class, but in the real theater in front of real people. I kept doing those. I kept getting better. I started having more and more fun. And it's because at that point in my professional development journey, I had cultivated the ability to not allow those feelings to swallow me up, to not allow those feelings to dictate the story of how I would understand myself and my experience. When those feelings came up, instead of me beating myself up and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid, I did that scene wrong, I'm so dumb, everyone wants me to leave this class, no one wants me to be here. Instead of saying those things when the feelings of embarrassment came up, I would say wow, I'm doing something new. This is really scary. I have to do it in front of people. I have to fail in front of people. I'm pretty freaking badass for being willing to do that and willing to show up in that way. And then what happens then is that when I experience those moments of embarrassment, in that experience of embarrassment or even shame, I'm actually creating a positive experience for myself in that. Because instead of making that feeling mean that I'm horrible and I should leave and no one wants me there and something's wrong with me and I don't belong, instead of making those feelings mean all those negative things about myself, I make them mean that I am a badass for doing something so exposing and scary. And then whenever I feel those difficult feelings, I feel proud of myself for being willing to put myself in that situation. And that pride helps me stay in the process and keep going and actually build the competence to get better at the skill. And it's also really helpful because I know in those moments that the embarrassment or the shame comes up, I know that my only job in that moment is to remind myself that I am doing a good job, to remind myself that I am doing it right. My emotions are going to tell me I'm doing it wrong. My only job is to refocus and remind myself that even though I'm having these uncomfortable emotions, I'm having these uncomfortable emotions because I'm doing it right, because I'm willing to be in that scary perform, learn model so that I can expand myself and what I'm capable of and learn a skill that's really, really important to me. So there's a couple things that I want you to take away from this episode. Number one, imposter syndrome is normal. The only way to avoid imposter syndrome is to also avoid growth. They go hand in hand. And number two, even though intellectually you might know imposter syndrome is normal, you will still experience some of the difficult feelings that come along with imposter syndrome. Feelings like frustration, disappointment, embarrassment, shame, feeling like you don't belong, feeling like you're not good enough. All of those feelings will come up, even if intellectually you know from this episode, it is normal to not always know what you're doing in your job. When those feelings come up, your only job in the moment is to practice being supportive of yourself, practice cheering yourself on, and practice reminding yourself that those feelings aren't coming up because you have done something bad. Those feelings are coming up because you have done something brave, something good, something incredible, and something that is ultimately helping you grow, not just into someone who has deeper skills, but into someone who has deeper resilience. While negative feelings can feel uncomfortable in the moment, they are one of the most powerful ways that we build lasting confidence. Because when we show ourselves that we can weather through that difficult emotion and we can keep showing up and we can stay in the game and keep giving it our all, that is when we truly start to feel badass and unstoppable. And what that means is that every instance of imposter syndrome is an opportunity to grow more confident. We think of imposter syndrome as this thing that makes us less confident, but imposter syndrome is just like a heavy weight at the gym. Every time we pick it up, we get stronger. So every time we have this feeling of like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm embarrassing myself, I'm messing it up, I'm wrong. It's in that moment then we get to decide, okay, I'm having this experience of doing it wrong. Do I want to avoid this and step back and shrink away? Or do I want to lean into this and show up even bigger and continue giving this my all, even though it's messy and imperfect? And the more you do that, the more that your impact at your company is going to grow, the faster you're going to get on a path to leadership, and most importantly, the more genuinely confident you are going to feel about yourself. So I hope that this episode gives you some permission to not have to be perfect and to realize that it's not about knowing everything and it's not about feeling amazing all of the time. It's about cultivating an internal strength that helps you bring the best of yourself, even in the moments that feel sticky and vulnerable. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you found this encouraging and uplifting, share it with a friend who you think would benefit from hearing this message. And if you want to go deeper into my work, check out my free resources by heading to jessguzikcoaching.com/free resources, where you are going to find an entire long list of free ebooks, video courses, audio courses, and trainings, all designed to help you grow your confidence and elevate your performance in your 9-to-5 career. Thank you so much for being here and tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.